What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Leo coming to you guys with yet another video coming to you guys today with another reaction. We've been recently checking out a lot of the worst matches from previous years. Now we're on to worst WWE matches of 2020. 2020 was the year of the whole pandemic where the world got shut down and the WWE had no fans and stuff like that. So it was very interesting to kind of not have that going on. So it kind of changed a lot of things on the fly for sure. Um, I'm looking forward to see what Cultaholic deems his worst matches of 2020. If I had to pick a match, or at least that I would think would probably be on the list, is probably the Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio match, the eye for an eye match. That was kind of very weird, for sure. Don't get me wrong, it just was not it. But we're gonna see. So we're gonna get into it. We're not gonna waste any more time. Let's see what Cultaholic deems worst WWE match of 2020.
2020 was the year that professional wrestling, and to a lesser extent the entire world, changed forever. The pandemic forced us all inside and made us go a little bit crazy, but thankfully we had the ever-stable world of professional wrestling to help keep us sane. Well, actually, no, we didn't, because WWE also decided to go absolutely bonkers during this time. They threw a load of wacky ideas at the wall, and while some of them stuck, the Boneyard and Firefly Funhouse matches come to mind, the rest of them slowly slid down the wall, leaving a horrible, smelly stain as they went. But which of 2020's stinkers stunk the most? Well, that's why we're here today. Before we get started, it's important to note that we tried not to include a lack of crowd in the decision-making for this list. The pandemic wasn't the roster's fault, we assume anyway, so we will do our best to not hold any empty arena matches in too much disregard. With that out of the way, I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are the 10 worst WWE matches of 2020. Join us. Number 10, Braun Strowman vs. Bray Wyatt at Money in the Bank. Apologies to any Bray Wyatt fans out there.
It kind of made sense just because, like, I thought on paper it looked like their match would have been special considering their history, and unfortunately it didn't live up to the expectations that a lot of fans thought it would be. So it kind of was almost like a balloon being deflated, I would say.
Obviously he's brilliant, but he's also in this video quite a lot. This Universal Championship match from Money in the Bank saw Bray Wyatt do battle with his former acolyte, no not those ones, reigning champion Braun Strowman. This was Strowman's first major program since winning the title at WrestleMania, so it needed to be a good showing. Unfortunately though, it wasn't, although you'd probably already worked that out because it's on this list. The match kept getting interrupted by Bray's spooky puppet brigade, who are effective in the Firefly Funhouse, but pretty much nowhere else. Thankfully, Braun also got in on the mind games, putting on his old black sheep mask and convincing his former leader that he had rejoined him. Psych! It was all a ruse, leading Braun to power slam Bray for the win. Whilst the in-ring action itself wasn't awful, everything surrounding it was. The spookiness of the Fiend was already being booked in a repetitive fashion, and this match was the first in a long series of missteps between Wyatt and Strowman. We would tell you what they are now, but we don't want to swamp you with information. Do you get it? Number 9, Randy Orton versus The Fiend at TLC.
Yeah, this wasn't good either. I mean, yeah, the added stipulation of being an Inferno match, since we haven't seen an Inferno match, I think, up until this point, was like 2013, if I'm not mistaken, between Kane and Bray Wyatt at SummerSlam 2013 that year. So on paper, I thought I don't know what it was. It's just something about the Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt feud that just never really was good. Like, I might be the only one that feels that way, but I think that the Randy Orton feud with Bray Wyatt, it just never was good. Like, the chemistry never seemed like it was all there. It kind of seemed like it was always missing something. But y'all comment down below. Let me know. Am I the only one that feels that way, or do you guys feel the same, or do you feel like that the Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt feud as a whole never really was that good just because of the match qualities that they would end up having?
Wyatt's second entry took place at 2020's final pay-per-view, TLC. It was supposed to be the blow-off match between him and Randy Orton, who had been feuding since October. However, as anyone who has seen our worst matches of 2021 list will know, this was far from the end of the feud. Due to each man's antics leading up to the show, including Randy locking Bray in a box and then setting it on fire, this match was made a Firefly Inferno match where you had to set your opponent alight in order to win. It's classic pro wrestling. Flaming sticks, flaming belts, flaming rocking chairs. This match had it all, except for good wrestling. It definitely didn't have that. The match ended when Randy Orton, the good guy, set the Fiend on fire, hit him with an RKO, and then poured gasoline all over his body before lighting it. Yet again, this match was ruined by all the spooky nonsense. The fact that it ended with a babyface burning a man alive, well, didn't help either. Number 8, Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa on NXT. This will be a controversial one. From lovable teammates.
I'm very surprised it's on this list just because they've had a lot of great matches. I never would have thought, at least for me, they would have had a bad match. But unfortunately, I think this one was going to be on there just because I don't know if it was part of them not having a crowd or just being very cinematic. Could probably be the problem too, but we'll see. I'm very interested to see what he has to say about this match specifically.
Mates in DIY to bitter enemies waging war in the main event of TakeOver New Orleans, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa had one of the best feuds in NXT history. If only WWE had taken the advice of hit musical act Fuel and left the memories alone. Sadly, they didn't do this. Instead, they kept stretching and stretching the story until it finally snapped during a nearly hour-long cinematic match nicknamed One Final Beat. Taking place on an April 2020 episode of NXT, the two men battered the stuffing out of each other all over an undisclosed location. This is the one time we're going to mention a lack of crowd in this list, because without the noise of an audience, this match took itself far too seriously, to the extent that it was hard to properly get invested in the action. The bout ended when Candice LeRae seemingly turned on her husband by kicking him square in the nuts, only to then do the same thing to Ciampa. Why not just kick Ciampa? Why pretend that you've taken his side? The whole thing was overly complicated, overly dramatic, and a blemish on one of the best pieces of wrestling storytelling of the past 2 decades. Number 7, the Women's Elimination Chamber at Elimination.
Yeah, this one wasn't good either. This, honestly, might be the worst Elimination Chamber match that they've had for the women since they brought Elimination Chamber in for them. They were building Shayna Baszler, and having her go run through the entire gauntlet, running through everybody that was in the match to win the match, to go on to face Becky for the title at Mania. It didn't do Shayna any favors, that's for sure, if you guys know how that ended. But it would have been more better to have other people involved, have the people that you did have in the match actually put up a showing, which kind of could have potentially carried the match to a different level than people would have expected it to be, but they just chose not to. They chose to have Shayna just, I'm just going to come here and I'm just going to wreck everybody. Which on paper, yeah, that makes Shayna look good just because it's like it builds her up as a monster and she keeps that mystique. But it doesn't do any favors for the other women in the match either.
Chamber. The Elimination Chamber is an inherently exciting gimmick. 6 guys or gals locked inside a vicious structure where they have to destroy all of their opponents in order to leave. Sign me the heck up. However, often WWE finds a way to disappoint, and that is exactly what they did in the main event of the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view in 2020. This 6-woman chamber match was for a shot against Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship at WrestleMania 36. It started out alright, with some decent wrestling between Natalya, Ruby Riott, and Sarah Logan. Then Shayna Baszler got in, and things went a bit weird. Baszler cut through the other women like a hot knife through butter, eliminating all 3 in quick fashion. She then did nothing for 5 minutes, waiting for Liv Morgan's pod to open before quickly eliminating her. She then did the exact same thing to Asuka to win. So the main thing about this match was that it was structured all wrong. We've got absolutely no problem with Shayna being built up up as a dominant threat. In fact, that is fantastic. But surely she should have come in last and tore through everyone like a hurricane. Instead, she spent most of her time standing around like a total plonker. Good job, WWE. Oh, and she ended up losing at Mania too. Number 6, Edge vs Randy Orton at WrestleMania 36. The former members of Rated RKO had one of
This one was very cinematic for sure, just because it didn't work from that standpoint. But kind of going back to what he was just saying before he got to this, it didn't work for Straight at all. It didn't, because you did have her stand in the ring for 5 minutes waiting for another entrant to come in, and it was like, okay, the fans were really turning on it at that point. And if you really look at the landscape of the match, it was only really 2 baby faces in there and stuff like that. So I don't know. They really just, the structuring of and how the match ended just wasn't the best. But going on to this match, Randy and Edge, definitely a feud that people really do love. But this right here just wasn't it. Knowing that they have some great matches in their history, but this one just wasn't one of them that people really remember.
One of the most heated rivalries of anyone heading into WrestleMania 36. Orton had viciously attacked Edge upon his return to Raw, delivering a vicious concerto to the Canadian's famously bad neck. This set up a last man standing grudge match between the two. Sadly, the last man standing stipulation applied mostly to the show's viewership, who struggled to stay awake during this long, grueling slog. For the better part of 40 minutes, Orton and Edge roamed around the backstage area, hitting each other with stuff like they were both playing SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. The rules of the match didn't help things either, as there were constant pauses in the action while the referee tried to count either man out. Mercifully, Edge ended Orton's night with a concerto and put us all out of our misery. The combination of this match being one of the most hyped on the show and one of the most disappointing is what puts it on this list. Edge and Orton would have benefited hugely from just having a normal 20-minute no-holds-barred match. Instead, we got this bloated thing that absolutely nobody is eager to revisit. Number 5, Brock Lesnar vs Ricochet at Super Showdown. Goldberg had an 86-second...
This was not it either. And what made it worse is the fact that, like, we know Brock Lesnar is known for having great matches with smaller opponents. So on paper, it looked like it could have been a potential good match. Even though Ricochet wasn't going to win just because they were doing the story between him and Drew going into Mania. But this would have been a good match for Brock to have, knowing, like I said, look at the matches that he had with small opponents, like with AJ Styles, with Rey Mysterio, Finn Balor, and Daniel Bryan or Bryan Danielson. He had great matches, so I'm thinking on paper, this could have been just as good. Or at least maybe even better, if depending on how they decide to do it. And boy, was I wrong. Ricochet as a main eventer was killed in a matter of seconds. He didn't get any offense on Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar just destroyed him. And people, after that, people just stopped caring about Ricochet just because. And it wasn't even his fault. It was just the fact that he was booked like a joke. He was booked like a joke. And he didn't recover. He didn't.
Second match with Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series 2016, and pretty much everybody loved it. Ricochet lasted 4 whole seconds longer at Super Showdown 2020, and everybody hated it. What gives? Well, for one, the first match didn't take place in Saudi Arabia, which usually helps. Secondly, Goldberg actually beat Brock in his match. And thirdly, Goldberg didn't look like a complete and utter chump when facing the Beast. Ricochet had looked pretty good in the build-up to this one, beating Bobby Lashley and Seth Rollins in a triple threat to earn the opportunity. He had also whacked Brock in the balls during the Royal Rumble match, allowing Drew McIntyre to eliminate him. Unfortunately, low blows don't weaken the Beast, they only make him angry. Lesnar absolutely devoured poor Rick at Super Showdown, dominating the entire match before pinning him with a single F5. We've all seen Lesnar have good matches with smaller opponents, but the booking clearly wasn't bothered about keeping Ricochet even remotely strong here. Instead, he got utterly buried and hasn't really had a whiff of the main event scene ever since.
I've been working at Miso for many years. We've been currently in the fast food industry cooking in live restaurants now.
Number 4, Braun Strowman versus Bray Wyatt at the Horror Show at Extreme Rules.
Brother, this entire pay-per-view was just not good either. You had at least like 2 matches that that's coming to mind right now that just wasn't good, and this is one of them.
Bray and Braun's sequel was more akin to Jaws than The Terminator, as it had a far inferior sequel. Off the back of their stinker at Money in the Bank, someone decided it would be a good idea to have Strowman and Wyatt battle again, this time in something called a Wyatt Swamp Fight. The two men took a trip back to their old haunt for this cinematic match. Highlights of the bizarre spectacle included Braun fighting off some masked men, one of whom turned out to be himself, a vision of Alexa Bliss attacking Braun with a snake, Bray getting chokeslammed into a boat, and both wiggling around in the swamp before Bray caught Braun with the mandible claw and transformed into the Fiend. So, who won the match? Why did all that stuff happen? What was the point of this? The answer to all 3 of those questions is nobody knows and nobody cares. The swamp fight was spooky nonsense at its finest. So bad, it was almost good. Note that I said almost there, because calling this match good would be an insult to all good things everywhere. Number 3, the Two-Wake Trophy Gauntlet match at Super Showdown. The Two-Wake Mountain.
We had that tournament, now we're getting another one for a title that nobody cares about. But that's neither here or there.
Is a rock formation just outside of the Saudi capital, Riyadh. WWE decided to honor this national landmark by naming a really bad match after it. Let's start with the fact that R-Truth, God bless him, almost won the damn thing, beating 3 people including Bobby Lashley and Andrade. Nothing against Truth, but come on. We should also mention that AJ Styles really should have won the thing, as he beat R-Truth as the last named entrant, but his moment was ruined when The Undertaker appeared out of nowhere to hit a chokeslam on AJ and win a match he wasn't even in. And the icing on the cake? Undertaker didn't even take the trophy he had just won with him when he left. So why did you do any of this, Undertaker? Please explain yourself. Everything about this match was confusing, from the participants to the layout to the finish. It was all one big convoluted way of setting up AJ Styles versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania, but I can think of about a million different ways to get there without doing any of this. Also, how much money did they spend on that trophy? And where is it now? Could use a new paperweight. Number 2, Seth Rollins versus Rey Mysterio at the Horror Show at Extreme Rules. Seth Rollins is a vicious...
This was just god-awful. I mean, I get the Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio feud on paper was cool, but this match was atrocious. You had Seth Rollins pop out an eye, a fake eye, mind you, of Rey Mysterio. And then after that, he started wearing a mask.
Soul, isn't he? He once tried to kill Edge with a curb stomp, he once drove Dean Ambrose's head through a bunch of cinder blocks, and he also pulled Rey Mysterio's eye out. At the Horror Show at Extreme Rules, Rollins and Mysterio competed in the first, and hopefully last, eye for an eye match, in which the objective was to remove your opponent's eye. Yep, in kayfabe, WWE officially sanctioned a match where permanent mutilation wasn't just allowed, but required. The actual work in this match was decent. Of course it was, look who's in it, but no amount of good wrestling could overcome how this bout ended. Seth somehow used the edge of the steel ring steps to pop Rey's eye out before he then threw up everywhere. Once again, in kayfabe, legendary luchador Rey Mysterio now only has one eye, except it's back now, I think. I'm not sure. Why did they do all this again? This whole match was really, really silly, and the finish was cartoonishly bad in execution. In fact, I wish I had been in this match so I could remove my own eyes and never have to see it again. Number 1, Goldberg versus The Fiend at Super Showdown. Obviously. If the
Had to be on there. Goldberg winning the title from The Fiend, who was booked as a monster. And this was the second time WWE messed up again with the Fiend character. They did it the first time when they literally had him lose in this whole match with Seth Rollins in a Hell in a Cell match, which was supposed to be no rules, no DQ, but yet all of a sudden Seth Rollins uses a sledgehammer and now the match is thrown out. And that was stupid. you ruined that stipulation, but he won the title, which was cool, but only for him to lose it to Goldberg a couple months later. That was like the final nail in the coffin, I feel like, for me, because it's like you just showed everybody it doesn't matter how many times you can book somebody to do something good, you'll still have Goldberg or somebody else come in and then take the title. This was pretty much around the time we were still having Brock and Goldberg be your top champions when nobody wanted it, when nobody cared. They wanted new stars to potentially get opportunities, and they weren't. And this was just one of those situations where it just happened. So it really sucked, for sure.
Fiend versus Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell was the first nail in the character's coffin, then this main event of Super Showdown 2020 was the last. Instead of the big win he desperately needed, the Fiend lost for the first time ever to Goldberg after just 3 minutes and a botched jackhammer. This completely killed any momentum that the Fiend had left. Not only did he lose, but he lost to an old man in the blink of an eye. Sorry, Ray. And the Fiend wasn't the only one to suffer because of this, as droves of fans turned against Goldberg for being the one to bury one of the most exciting new characters in years. So why did this happen? Well, to set up Goldberg versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 36, a match that didn't end up happening because of the pandemic. Nice to see it was all worth it then. The only upside to this was that it freed the Fiend up to have the
Yeah, it freed the Fiend up for that John Cena match, which, don't get me wrong, was really good, but I would have preferred them to keep the title on him for sure.
Firefly Funhouse match with John Cena at WrestleMania. Other than that, everything about it was simply dreadful, and there is no doubt in our minds that it was the worst WWE match to take place in all of 2020.
Yeah, this was the worst match to take place in all of 2020, in my personal opinion. Yeah, it just ruined the Fiend's character in the long run, and it's like it felt like he just didn't recover from it at all. But yeah, comment down below. Let me know, what do you guys feel is the worst WWE match of 2020? If it was on the list, let me know what it was and why. And if it wasn't on this list, let me know what it should have been and why as well. I would love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section down below. Road to 350 subscribers, but the ultimate goal is 10K. When I get to 10K, I will do a giveaway with one of my lucky subscribers. We'll have the opportunity to win a WWE Championship from WWE Shop. So if you want to be a part of that and be the potential subscriber that does win that, subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. You can always change your mind in the future, but why would you want to do that? I'm trying to give you guys daily wrestling content. The grind does not stop. But super kick that like button, helps my channel gets pushed across the platform so more people can see what I'm doing over on YouTube. Superman Punch, that post notification bell so every time I post a new video. It's a reaction video, rant video, live stream, any type of video. You can be in the loop of things when I do drop a video. And spear that subscribe button helps spear that subscribe button as well. Takes 3 seconds out of your day to do those 3 things for me, helps in the progression of my channel. But with that being said, hope everybody has a great day, a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys in the next video.